So today we're going to look at absolute value equations. All right, you've probably seen absolute value equations in your past, whether it be Math 1, Math 2, or Math 3. But as a quick refresher, an absolute value equation is an equation that has an absolute value brackets around it. And with absolute values, the rule for them is that anything that comes out of the brackets automatically becomes positive. So if it's negative, it becomes positive. If it's positive, it stays positive. Okay, so one way to think about this is when you have an absolute value equation, there are two possible equations that you're solving. There is the positive version, so x will equal positive 3, or there's a negative version, where x will equal negative 3. Because there are, again, two possible answers, because the absolute value of 3 is 3, and the absolute value of negative 3 is also 3. Okay, so when something is negative on the inside of the brackets, it becomes positive when it comes out, all right, but only when it comes out. You could put anything in absolute value brackets. You could have clowns. So the clown could be 8, but because there's two possible answers, clown can be equal to 8, or the clown could be equal to negative 8. Okay, let's look at some equations and see how this works. Here's our first example. We have the absolute value of 2x minus 8, and it equals 6. Well, to make your two equations when you're doing these types of problems, the first equation you're going to have that looks just like the one you were given. Okay, it's 2x minus 8 equals 6. And the second equation you're going to use is going to change the answer to become negative. So it's going to be 2x minus 8 equals negative 6. All right. You're only changing the answer to be a negative. So any answer you have, you're just going to change all the signs. Okay. And then the other thing about these is you have to get the absolute value brackets completely by themselves and isolated before you can do this, before you can make the two equations. So if you have something that's added or subtracted or multiplied or divided on the outside of the brackets, before you can make your two equations, you have to get rid of those so that the absolute value brackets are entirely by themselves on the one side of the equation. All right, with our two equations set up, now we can solve them. So you're going to add 8 to both sides of each equation, then divide both sides by 2. You'll get 7 and 1. Now, with absolute value equations, one thing you want to do is be able to check your answers to make sure they actually work. So you're going to put your answers back into the equation, and let's see what happens. So we have 7 as the first answer, so 2 times 7 is 14. 14 minus 8 is 6, and the absolute value of 6 is 6, so that works out. On the other answer, you have 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. 2 minus 8 is negative 6, but the absolute value of negative 6 is still positive 6, so that again checks out. So these will both work, and you'll be good to go. Take a moment, and here's our next equation. Try to solve this on your own. Pause the video, make up your two equations, solve, and then check both answers. So take a moment and pause, and then come back in a second. So hopefully if you paused and you've solved the equation, you can check to see how you did. Here are your two equations. Negative x plus 6 equals 2, and then negative x plus 6 equals negative 2. Now notice in this, the negative signs inside the absolute value brackets did not change. It's just the answer at the end changed. So if you did this right, you would have gotten 4 and 8. And then checking them out, they both work. All right. Next example. Now in this case, we have a little bit more on our answer than just a number. We have a variable as well. This is going to cause some issues that we're going to see how to resolve them in a minute. So again, you're going to take your two or your absolute value equation, and again, the absolute value brackets are by themselves, so we're ready to make our two separate equations. We have 2x minus 2 equals 3x, and then 2x minus 2 equals negative 3x. You're going to just change the sign on the term to become a negative versus the positive that it started out as. All right, we solve both of these. So you're going to get the x's on one side, and then you're going to solve for the variable. All right, so take a moment, solve both these equations, see what you come up with. Okay, hopefully you're back unpaused and we're ready to go. You're going to find out that x is going to equal negative 2, and x is going to equal 2/5. All right, so you have to, again, check these answers. So it's important that you check the answers. You put negative 2 back in for x. So negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. And negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. And the absolute value of negative 6 is positive 6. So it's going to be 6 on one side. Let's see what the other side looks like. So negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Well, 6 and negative 6 are not the same thing. So that actually does not work. Okay, an absolute value bracket cannot equal a negative number, and 3 times negative 2 would give you negative 6. So that answer cannot work. All right, this is not an answer that is acceptable for our problem. It won't equal what it's supposed to. Now let's try the 2/5. So 2/5 times 2 is 4/5. 4/5 minus 2 is going to be negative 6/5. Absolute value of negative 6/5 is positive 6/5. Okay, and on the other side, 3 times 2/5 is 6/5. So that does work. Okay, if you're not sure how to use that mental math that I just did, you can always use a calculator to do the problem. Calculator does fractions quite nicely. All right. So in this case, you can see that one answer does work and one answer doesn't. And one of the tricks about looking at when to check your answers for absolute value equations is notice that the first two that we did were just a number. But this one has an x, it has a variable on the outside of it. And that can cause some issues. So it's really important you check the equations that have variables as in the answer parts. Okay. All right. Try another one. Take a moment, pause the video, try to solve this one on your own. Again, remember you're changing the sign on the answer to get this right and make your two equations. So go ahead and pause the video, try to solve this one and see how you do. So you've paused the video. Hopefully you've solved it. Hopefully we got it all right. We're going to check it right now. So you're going to have your two equations. All right, notice the second equation, the answer, the 3x minus 2 gets multiplied by negative 1 as a whole. So that means the 3x and the negative 2 will both change signs. Not just one or the other, but both of them. Okay, you'll end up with two different answers that you should have gotten by now. You have x equals negative 2, and you have x equals positive 2. Again, you want to check your answers. If you put negative 2 in for the left-hand side, your equation, 3 times negative 2 is negative 6, and negative 2 minus 2 is negative 8. Or sorry, negative 6 minus 2 is negative 8, right? Well, the absolute value cannot equal a negative number, so this answer will not work. As for the 2, if you put 3 times 2, you get 6 minus 2 is 4. And then on the inside of the brackets, 2 minus 6 is negative 4, but the absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4. So those two things do, in fact, work. So that is an answer. All right. Now with absolute value equations, we can get a little more complicated. So we're going to look at a quadratic absolute value equation. Okay. The same rules apply. It just has more stuff. Okay. So we're going to make our two equations because the absolute value brackets are by themselves on the left-hand side. So we're going to have an equation where the answer is 1, and an equation where the answer is negative 1. Okay, we have to get these two quadratics to be equaling 0, so we're going to subtract the 1 on the first one so that we get x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. All right, now we can solve that. All right, in order to solve this, we have to factor. Now, the nice thing about this class right now, we're going to be, anything that we kind of give you is going to be easily factorable if it is a quadratic, or you can use the quadratic formula. In this case, I would not use the quadratic formula because it's way too involved for something that can be factored simply. All right, the factors of this are going to be negative 2 and positive 1. All right, and then you're going to solve both those factors. All right, so x will equal positive 2 and x will equal negative 1. All right, next what you're going to do is the other side. So you have, this time you're going to add 1 to both sides, and you're going to end up with x squared minus x equals 0. So this is a different kind of quadratic. This is where you can just take the greatest common factor of x out of both terms. So you'll have x and then x minus 1. Set both those factors equal to 0, x will equal 0, and x will equal positive 1. All right. Now you can check all these answers. You put them all in for x, and I'll give you a hint. Because there's no variable on the outside of the absolute value brackets, so the 1 on the outside as the answer doesn't have an x on it, all these are going to work. So if you check them all, they all work out to be 1 some way or another. All right. So take a moment, try the next one on your own. Okay, it works the same idea as before. See what you come up with, and I'm going to pause the video, or you pause the video, and come back and see how you did. All right, so hopefully you pause the video and try it out on your own to see how you did. You're going to have two equations. One's going to have a positive 8 as an answer. One has a negative 8. If you factored it correctly when you solved it, you should get x minus 6 and x plus 4 as your factors. You solve them both, you get x equals 6 and x equals negative 4. On the other hand, the other equation, you're going to add 8 because you're quadratic, which you can factor. You have x minus 4 and x plus 2, and x will equal positive 4 and negative 2. Again, you can check all 4 of your answers, and you have all of them that work. Okay? So hopefully this helps you with absolute value equations. Hopefully you tried some out on your own. If you have questions, make sure you ask. Good luck.